So, full disclaimer before we get into today's Canucks conversation. Oh boy, I just infringed a trademark, didn't I? But I may have myself some hockey going on while the Vancouver Canucks are playing the Anaheim Ducks later this afternoon, so I don't know when the post-game video is going to come out. My own personal hockey tournament kicked off yesterday and it carries over into today, and we may be playing games for most of the evening depending on what happens. So I can't guarantee a post-game video for Canucks and Anaheim that's going to be on time, but at the end of the day, we'll try to get that out regardless by any means necessary. You know the drill. So, with that being said, let's jump over to the topic of this particular video. What I wanted to do was revisit the Elias Pettersson contract signing from yesterday, because we had ourselves a really nice article published on The Athletic by Thomas Drance and Rick Dalibor, highlighting how exactly the Vancouver Canucks were able to get this done. It was a really good piece, and I'd highly recommend you go out there and read it yourself. The link is going to be in the description. The tweet goes out there and reads this: how the Elias Pettersson deal got done, a trade offer, a face-to-face meeting, and a change of heart on timing. This article is a huge, deep dive into what went down, and it's very informative, so if you want to get the scoop, hey, the article is there. But I wanted to focus on one particular aspect of this entire conversation that was cut and posted onto Twitter by Taj1944. Take a look at this tweet in regards to the article that was posted. Jim Rutherford and Patrik Allvin straight up mentioned the Matthew Tkachuk situation to Elias Pettersson during their meeting this week. Then they told Pettersson teams are calling about a trade, and that they would at least have to consider it if Pettersson didn't want to re-sign now. And then the excerpt from the article reads this: we've also been told that the Canucks brass brought up the Tkachuk consideration to Pettersson, explaining to him that the club didn't want to get caught in a similar situation. And finally, the Canucks did let him know directly that teams were in fact calling to inquire about his availability. It was something the club had to at least consider. And I think we're all familiar with Drance and Dalibor. They're two of the most connected insiders on the scene here with the Canucks beat reporting staff. But when it comes to this idea here, this is one of the reasons why I feel like going from Jim Benning and John Weisbrod to Jim Rutherford and Patrik Allvin, plus the assistants in Cami Granato, Emily Castonguay, who works on the contracts, this new staff is such a breath of fresh air. Because this kind of negotiation tactic, it's really smart, it's really upfront, and it happens to also be very logical. Because all of these points that were brought up, they make perfect sense, but these are the kinds of things that Reddit people will go out there and say, that TV analysts will go out there and say. Rarely is it that you see negotiations like this leak out into the public where it's like, yeah, this is the argument that the Canucks management staff used. They had this Matthew Tkachuk situation happen just across the border, the provincial border that is, a few years ago. That was a really big deal. Matthew Tkachuk said he wanted to re-sign. They said they'd hold it off until the offseason. They did, and then all of a sudden it's like, boom, he doesn't want to come back. He only wants to go to a southeastern United States team. St. Louis, Dallas, Nashville, Florida. He only wants to go there, so the Flames were very restricted. And sure, they got themselves a package that was seen at the time as a pretty good one. Huberdeau, Uyghur, Cole Schwindt, all that other stuff that was tossed in there. But at the end of the day, you lost out on Matthew Tkachuk. And Jonathan Huberdeau hasn't really been the consolation prize that he was touted to be. So when this trade went down, it kind of served as a hazard light to the rest of the NHL, that, hey, your RFAs may be able to pull something like this off, so you better sign them quickly. And for Elias Pettersson to hear that and be also told, yeah, not only are we thinking about Matthew Tkachuk when we think about you, but we're also getting trade offers on you because you haven't signed, because there's no commitment on paper. Other teams, like the Carolina Hurricanes, are asking about you, and we have no choice but to consider it because you're not committed. And that kind of a scolding, maybe it wasn't like as harsh as that. That's not even really too harsh, honestly. I feel like it could be worse. But that kind of message being sent to one of your star players that, yeah, we have to think about trading you. You know that, right? Teams are asking about you. We have no choice but to entertain those offers. That entire sentiment, I feel, is spooky enough to get a player like Pettersson to come down and say, okay, fine, let's just get this done secretly. I always wanted to be here, so let's negotiate, let's get it through, and then we can stop talking about the idea of trading me, right? Because at the end of the day, Pettersson said it himself during the press conference yesterday, that when you're in a negotiation, you can't show all your cards right off the bat, right? But I think for the Vancouver Canucks' sake, it was a good thing that they did, because this set of cards is really damning to whatever future relationship this team and this player may have together. That there may be room for that relationship to fracture itself because of the lack of an extension, because other teams are starting to ask, and because Matthew Tkachuk yeeted away from Calgary all those years ago. It's an example of how the NHL is shifting today, and how different teams and different players are handling these negotiations, because Pettersson was all within his right to go out there and do that Austin Matthews strategy. Get another 100-point season, use that as leverage in the offseason, and get as much money as he could. But instead, he went the William Nylander route, and okay, he didn't negotiate like William Nylander. He just signed a William Nylander-esque contract. Nothing above $12 million. He's only making 11.6, which is very appropriate, I'd feel, for the long-term prosperity of what Elias Pettersson could do in Vancouver. And I saw a lot of other people saying similar things as well, like, oh, the Canucks told Pettersson about the Carolina Hurricanes contract offer, and that scared him so much he doesn't want to go from Vancouver to North Carolina that he just manned up and decided to sign that contract. I mean, there may be some truth to that. There are a lot of people in the Carolina Hurricanes subreddit that were sort of frustrated when Elias Pettersson signed his deal yesterday. They're like, okay, well, I guess he doesn't want to play with us. Yeah, I mean, I can't say I blame him, right? And I feel that's a really funny sentiment, because it's maybe not like entirely the case here, but at the same time, there is some element of truth to it where it's like, yeah, Jim Rutherford probably told Pettersson something along the lines of, hey, if that Carolina Hurricanes offer of Jesperi Kotkaniemi and whatever else actually gets to a point where we consider it, there's a very real possibility you're in freaking Raleigh with all the Finns, and you leave behind this life here in Vancouver. And that's scary enough to go out there and want to sign and just get this entire thing over with. And you could see it in the body language of the press conference yesterday too. Pettersson's smiling, he's cracking jokes, he's sarcastic again, he's like all the stuff that we loved about him from his media interview days in 2018-19. He's bringing that back in a way. And a lot of the reporters in Vancouver were saying, yeah, I mean, throughout the course of the season, he was a little bit stern, he was serious, he was more stoic than we're used to seeing, so seeing him light up about it and get into the groove of having fun during media interviews post-contract extension, it kind of tells you just how much this was weighing on his mind. Hopefully, this leads into a better performance, right? Like, on the ice, we can see Pettersson maybe letting himself go a little bit more, being a little bit more free, being a little bit less hesitant because he's not worried about the contract. And hopefully he's able to go out there and just start dominating in the way that he was at the beginning of the year, because he was tied for first in the NHL in points with two other Canucks at some point in October and November. So this is, at the end of the day, a very important hockey player that had re-signed in Vancouver. And I mean, look, we are talking all this talk about it. We made all these videos, firstly about the extension itself, and then about the Nylander comparison, and now we're talking about the Matthew Tkachuk conversation, which allowed this thing to go through. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this latest update in regards to PD and the Canucks. What do you think differently about the situation, learning that the Canucks straight up told Pettersson, hey, we might trade you. We have no choice but to consider it because you have not re-signed. There are teams asking about you, and because of Matthew Tkachuk's situation a few years ago, we have no choice but to consider it. What are your thoughts about that argument? Let me know in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.